Hey, welcome back everyone. So in today's video, I'm going to be drawing this pose, and I believe the artwork is originally from Alan Davis. So correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't see a signature on this one, but I'm pretty sure that's the artist. Amazing work. By the way, I love this pose. Love the foreshortening, the proportions of the anatomy, everything's just spot on. So I knew that I had to stop what I was doing and do a drawing of it because I learned so much from this process. It's actually how I started drawing comics in the first place. So I think it hits on a couple notes here. Basically, when I first picked up comics when I was about 14, I did so because they were visually stimulating. So I very much chased around the eye candy books. And as I tell people, they weren't just stories, they were art books to me because I was trying to copy every image I could out of them. And I felt like I was drawing better all of a sudden. So that's kind of the neat thing, is that you get this hit of inspiration and also this sense of direction because you're able to look at somebody's work where they're doing something much better. Now, I think that in the beginning, you don't know why it looks better. And that's probably one of the reasons why you can even look back at these guided illustrations and see some real noticeable flaws. It's because not only do you have to learn to draw things better, you have to start to understand why it works and why it doesn't. And again, those gaping flaws in your work will start to become more and more apparent, as to where in the beginning you're just like, I don't get what people are saying. My work's amazing. Why are they telling me the anatomy's off or whatever? So it's not simply just drawing from the stuff. You do have to try to educate yourself on what and why. But this is a great way to elevate your thinking rather quickly. And again, like I said, it gives you that hit of confidence and kind of that feeling like you're developing faster than you were before. So I highly recommend it. But then there's the other aspect of, well, if I know that I'm learning faster and drawing better when I do these types of studies, well, shouldn't I incorporate that into my output, my professional work, my comic book, my commissions? I mean, isn't it just a better, more effective use of my time? And I've struggled with this for years. I know I shouldn't have, and that's really why I wanted to make the video. I want to try to help people that might struggle with this concept. So you probably heard the quote, good artists borrow, great artists steal. And this has been widely accredited to Pablo Picasso, but some people seem to claim that another artist said it. I don't know who said it. And there's lots of ways you can interpret this, right? I'm sure that the way that I understand it and what I derive from it could be very different from what you might. But essentially, what I tend to believe at this point, in this juncture of my life, is that we have to be able to look at the world around us and grab from it almost indiscriminately at times. Like the fact that we're transforming it through ourselves, or the way that we transform it through ourselves, is our style, is our voice. So I think that when I originally got into comics, I was very concerned with this idea that if I didn't draw everything right out of my head, then I wasn't an artist, or I wasn't as good. And I think I had a lot of food for thought. I had a lot of imagery kind of floating around, and I used to draw, I wouldn't say all the time from out of my head, because like I mentioned, this is what got me started drawing comics, is I would recreate, like I think a lot of us do, from the stuff that really inspires us. But as I got to where I started making my own books, and I was, working for a publisher, Time Press, and making his books, like I did a lot of it out of my head, but I also think that looking back, that it shows. And I do remember there were panels that I definitely referenced out for sure, but I don't remember being very strategic about it or aware of it, or definitely didn't utilize it to the best of its ability. I'll tell you what, I honestly remember at times feeling guilty, like I still needed to go back to that. And I think that's where a bit of psychosis occurred. Like basically it wasn't a good pattern of thinking. But to me, it's not like I had a bunch of people to ask. I feel like that's kind of the tricky thing about comics in general. Now it's a lot more open. There's a lot more people to ask. There's a lot more videos, content floating around. I think it's a lot better for newer artists to understand all this stuff. But if you didn't go to a comic show when I got into comics, you just didn't know who to ask. And I think that I was still even embarrassed to even say that. Like, hey, is it okay to copy other people's art? Like, honestly, I just don't remember having the conversations, which is really kind of sad. Like, and that's again why I felt compelled to make this video, because I'm really starting to open up to the idea that I don't think we should be so apprehensive about it. I think that anything should go, aside from copying a particular piece in its entirety and then trying to pass it off on your own and not give credit to the artist. I think that's just silly. Instead, I believe, and you guys are open to comment below and tell me I'm out of my mind. You know, I start the conversation. But basically, I believe that as long as you're taking a piece of the puzzle. So I like the idea of, like, if I did implement this into my work strategy for professional work and a published book, right? I would take the compositions from one or two artists, the poses from one or two artists, and I wouldn't even say every pose. There's certain things I like to do on my own. So I probably would shy away from needing another artist for that. So for instance, I generally feel pretty good about drawing poses. But again, like I mentioned earlier in this video, if I see a pose that resonates and it's like, oh, I would struggle with that one, I stop what I'm doing and I draw that. And it could be figure drawing, comic art, you name it. Sometimes I'll take a weird picture of myself. I'm sure you don't want to imagine that, but I basically will do that to get that, hard angle or whatever, and it makes a lot more sense than scouring the internet. So I'll do that for like foreshortening with arms a lot. I'll stop what I'm doing. I'll draw that because I know that is teaching me a lot. It's teaching me something that I am struggling with, and I need to, again, acknowledge that and try to, achieve something more. And so when an artist is doing it well, again, it just makes so much more sense to make good use of your time. I feel like if you can get your ego and pride out of the way, it becomes, do you want to work hard or do you want to work smart? Now, there's a time and a place for each, obviously. There's a time that we do need to work really hard. I'll tell you what, comics is hard work. We're going to work hard regardless. But if you're on a deadline, working smart has to play a factor. See, that's where I can't relate as much because the books that I did have been on my own timeline and they were very laid back. So I can't really relate there. I can relate on the deadlines for different freelance jobs I've done over the years. Storyboards were a nightmare. Like, that's ultimately why I got out of, like, I was just like, I wasn't as fast as I should be, and some of the deadlines just rocked me, and it's like they'd even move deadlines up on you with, you get an email the next morning, wake up, and they're like, oh, they need that by noon, and you thought you had another 2 days. Like, it was nuts. But whatever, that's the nature of the beast. And if you want to make that money and be competitive in that field, you better line up and do it because somebody else will. And that's the thing, like, when you start looking at these really competitive markets that you want to be involved in, you better look at some options for shortcuts. And again, I think when we let our ego and pride get in the way, we're like, oh yeah, but you shouldn't copy too much, and I don't want people to label me a clone of somebody else. But that's where I believe the term steal like an artist, or I guess that's the book, but the, good artists borrow, great artists steal. I believe and I don't know, but my interpretation is the part where your great artists steal is that you wouldn't use one definable source material. You would mix it together with a bunch. And if you think about it, I mean, isn't that everything ever that you've ever seen? That's an example of that. Like, every invention, you can see where it came from. Like, all of them originally came from nature. There's even an example where a guy talks about how the inventor came up with Velcro. He noticed those little burrs, I can't remember what they're called, that stick to your pants. He knows how they're really hard to get off. You got to kind of rip them off your pants. Those little things called. Anyways, little burrs, I'll call them. They stick to you. He got the idea. He looked at that under a microscope and saw that the reason it stuck to you is because of the grain and the teeth on it. That's where Velcro came from nature. And the more you look at inventions throughout history, that's happened. And reinventions are a prime example of how they just keep taking a similar concept or multiple concepts, mashing them together. So it just makes sense in everything. Nothing's truly original. Our imagination comes from observation of nature and existence and life. And we have just mashed it up in all these different scenarios, and it comes out as genius and invention when really it's reorganization of concepts. So I don't know, hopefully it doesn't seem a little too detached from the subject here, but essentially when you go to look at that, and you say, man, I want to learn and grow faster, and I want to quit being so frustrated that I'm trying to be so inventive in my mind. If the ideas aren't there, put them there. Get them in your head by, again, pick the people, and you could do 5 artists, 10 artists. It could be arts from different, it doesn't have to be comic artists, right? You could take artists from different fields, artists from different eras. That's been done plenty of times. You go back far enough, people think you invented this new thing, and it's like, then somebody goes, well, no, isn't that from back in the Renaissance the one guy was doing? Like, you just got to be creative in that regard. And then when you start to think that way, you realize like, oh my God, the options are limitless. And again, it's repeatable, it's effective because you now have a blueprint. You now have basically these mentors that you otherwise wouldn't have if you were just trying to create just based on whatever pops in your head and your own creative energy and this and that. And I'll tell you what, another safeguard of this way of thinking and this process is that it's more repeatable when times get hard. And I'm not trying to sound negative, but I'm trying to be realistic that there are good times and they're bad. We all know that. Markets dry up. The phone quits ringing. Again, I don't want to sound too negative, but it's good to be realistic and be ready for things. There's times your energy levels aren't there. There's times that you get sick and you got to work on a sick day, right? We've all been there. And so essentially, when you can do these things that are more, I don't know, I keep saying repeatable, but orchestrated, organized into steps and actions, fundamental processes. Anyways, then you can take these and you can now kind of set yourself a little bit on autopilot. It's the same concept where when you do something so many times over and over again, it becomes second nature, right? That's the kind of stuff that really helps people, professionals, get through the hard times because they're like, oh man, it's tough, it's rough, I don't feel like doing this, but I got to get it done, it's my job. And that's when you rely on your repetitive behavior, basically your subconscious behavior that you've trained to be actionable and get through it. So anyways, I just think it's a smart way to work smart, not hard when you can. And so thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. More on the way soon, and bye for now.